December 31st, 1944. The final day of a blood-soaked year. At 30,000 feet above war-torn Germany, something impossible is about to happen. Two American B-17 Flying Fortress bombers are on a collision course. But the collision itself isn't what makes this story extraordinary. It's what happens next. Welded together by the violence of impact, transformed into an 8-engine metal monster that shouldn't be able to fly, these two aircraft will attempt the impossible, bring their crews home alive. But survival will demand a price. One man will remain trapped inside the twisted metal. One man who will continue praying as flames creep closer. One man whose sacrifice will haunt his brothers in arms for the rest of their lives. This is the true story of Lieutenant Glenn Rojohn, Lieutenant William Leake, and Corporal Joe Russo. A story of courage, loyalty, and what it truly means to never let go. The morning of December 31st, 1944, dawns bitter and grey over Europe. Lieutenant Glenn Rojohn climbs aboard his B-17, the little skipper. The aircraft bears scars from previous missions, but she still flies with pride. Beside him, Lieutenant William Leake settles into the co-pilot's seat. In the ball turret below, Corporal Joe Russo checks his guns. This is their 19th mission. 19. Too many of their friends never made it past mission 19. The B-17 Flying Fortress is a marvel of American engineering. 10 men crew each aircraft, 4 massive engines, 13 50 caliber machine guns, built to absorb punishment and keep flying. Built to survive hell, but no aircraft was built to survive what's about to happen today. The target is Hamburg, German refineries that fuel Hitler's war machine. The formation of bombers carves white contrails through the frozen sky. Below them, the city sprawls like a wounded beast, already scarred from previous raids. Inside the cockpit, Rojohn's fingers are stiff with cold despite layers of wool. Leake scans the horizon. Neither man speaks. The silence before combat always tastes the same. Cold, sharp, full of fate. Then the intercom crackles. "Skipper, flak dead ahead." Rojohn's voice remains calm. "Roger." Eyes open. We stay tight. No drift. The sky transforms into a furnace of steel. Black flowers of flak burst around them by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Each explosion sends hot metal fragments screaming through the air. The bomber shudders violently. Every burst feels like a punch from God. In his glass sphere below, Russo swings his guns, heart pounding. His entire world is transparent. He can see everything. The earth 6 miles down, the flak exploding beneath him. The other bombers in formation. He has never felt so exposed, so small, so vulnerable. Ahead of them, another B-17 takes a direct hit. Flames erupt from its wing. It drops from formation, trailing smoke like a dying comet. Russo watches parachutes deploy. He counts 6. Then the aircraft explodes. "Mother of God," Russo whispers. No one blames him. The bombardier calls out, "Mark a flare, dead ahead." Rojohn keys the mic. "Bombardier, you are clear." The bomb bay doors yawn open. Wind screams through the fuselage. A long chain of bombs falls into the abyss. Seconds later, the refinery below erupts in massive fireballs that claw upward, painting the sky orange. Mission accomplished. But the nightmare is just beginning. The formation pivots, beginning the long journey home to England. They tighten ranks, ready for what always comes next. The Luftwaffe waits for the wounded birds on their way home. Damaged bombers are easier to kill. Gunfire flashes to their left, and Me-262 jet fighter screams past so fast that Russo barely glimpses its grey wings. Its cannons tear through a neighbouring fortress. The bomber falls away in flames. No parachutes. Then comes the swarm. BF-109 seconds dive through the formation. W-190 seconds follow, darting like ghosts. firing at lightning speed. Inside Little Skipper, the crew works as one organism. Sweat soaks through gloves despite the freezing air. Every second stretches into an hour. Every breath tastes of metal and fear. On their right, another B-17 called Faithful Forever takes multiple hits. The pilot's voice breaks through the radio, distorted by static and terror. Control failing. We're too low. We have to bail out. Rojohn closes his eyes for half a second as Faithful Forever drops from view. Another crew gone. Another empty table at reunions that might never happen. Then salvation arrives. P-51 Mustang fighters burst onto the scene like silver angels, guns blazing. The German fighters scatter. The sky clears. Just a little. Leek exhales shakily. Thank God. Rojohn corrects him. Thank the boys in the Mustangs. They approach the North Sea. They're almost safe. Almost home. Then Rojohn sees it. The lead bomber, 9 Lives, is climbing too steeply, too erratically. It drifts out of formation like a drunk stumbling toward disaster. Rojohn grabs his radio. 9 Lives are just heading, you are off course. No response. In another bomber nearby, Captain Ethan Porter sees it too. His voice explodes over the radio. Little Skipper, watch out! Collision vector! Collision vector! Leek's eyes go wide. Jesus Christ! Glenn! Pull! Rojohn yanks the controls with all his strength. Too late. A sound like thunder tears through the sky as 9 Lives smashes upward into Little Skipper from below. Metal screams. Wings shear. Rivets fire like bullets inside the cockpit. The world turns white, then black, then red. When Rojohn's vision clears, he cannot process what he's seeing. They're still flying. But they shouldn't be. 2 B-17 bombers are now one, fused together by the violence of impact. Wings tangled, fuselages locked, 8 engines somehow still turning. A chimera of aluminum and steel that defies every law of physics. And somewhere in the twisted metal below, Russo's voice crackles through the intercom, high with panic. Get me out! The turret is jammed! I can't move! Rojohn's mind races. They have maybe minutes before the whole structure tears apart, or catches fire, or simply falls from the sky like a stone. Hydraulics are failing! Leek shouts, wrestling with his controls. Rojohn can feel it. The aircraft, this impossible monster they're now flying, wants to die. Every instinct screams at him to bail out, jump, save himself. But below them is the North Sea. The freezing water will kill them in minutes. And Russo is trapped. We try for land, Rojohn says, his voice cutting through the chaos. The sea will kill us. We need land. Leek looks down at the turret where Russo is imprisoned in his glass cage. He understands what that decision means. Russo isn't getting out. Fire begins racing along the lower wing. Ammunition starts cooking off in bursts. The horizon spins. In the waist of the aircraft, the other crew members are frantically trying to free Russo. They pull at the twisted metal. They try to pry open the jammed mechanisms. Nothing works. The collision has welded the turret shut like a tomb. Through it all, Russo keeps praying. His Hail Mary, over and over. The crew can hear every word. Rojohn fights the controls with everything he has, feathering engines, rocking the massive combined weight. The coastline reappears ahead. They have a chance, maybe. But the fire is spreading. Heat scorches their faces. Flames crawl through the radio compartment like serpents seeking flesh. The crew does everything humanly possible to free Russo, but the steel refuses to bend. Finally, choking on smoke, knowing the fire will consume them all, they look into Russo's eyes one last time. Russo sees their faces. He understands. He blesses himself. And he keeps praying. The crew jumps through the flames, parachutes blossoming in the sky behind them. Rojohn and Leek remain at the controls. Fields appear below. Earth rushes up like it wants blood. Jump. Rojohn screams at Leek. Bail out. Now. Leek doesn't move. If I go, you die. There's no time to argue. The ground is seconds away. The impact is cataclysmic. 9 lives tears apart on contact. Little Skipper slams into frozen soil, skidding through a farmer's hut, ripping open like a tin can crushed by a giant's boot. Then silence. A silence so complete it hurts the ears. Rojohn gasps. He moves his fingers. Pain shoots through his body. Pain means he's alive. Beside him, Leek coughs, spits blood, and laughs through the agony. German rifles surround them instantly. Soldiers bark orders. A weapon barrel presses against Leek's forehead. But even the German soldiers are gesturing frantically at the leaking gasoline. They're afraid of the explosion that could happen any second. The 2 American pilots raise their hands. They survived the impossible collision. They rode 2 fused bombers to the ground. They're alive. But one voice will never speak again. Rojohn whispers his name. Russo. Rojohn and Leek are marched away from the wreckage at gunpoint. Behind them, smoke still curls from what remains of the 2 entangled bombers. Pieces of twisted aluminum stick out from the earth like broken bones. They're thrown into the back of a cold German truck. The tailgate slams shut. The darkness is complete. Leek clutches his broken ribs, breathing through clenched teeth. You kept us alive, Glenn. That's what matters. Rojohn stares into the void. I left Russo behind. You gave him a chance, Leek says softly. That's more than most get in this war. Rojohn doesn't reply. The weight of those words is too heavy. Hours later, they arrive at a Luftwaffe interrogation center. Rojohn is shoved onto a metal chair in a small concrete room. A German officer with sharp features studies him coldly. You are Lieutenant Glenn Rojohn, pilot, 100th Bomb Group. Rojohn keeps his gaze level. Name, rank, serial number. The officer smiles slightly. We know far more than that. We know your friends call your aircraft the Little Skipper. We know you have flown missions over Mersburg and Berlin. Rojohn refuses to flinch. So why are you so nervous? The smile evaporates. The blow cracks across Rojohn's jaw. His head rocks sideways. Copper taste fills his mouth. You Americans still believe you win this war, the officer says, leaning close. Very foolish. Rojohn stares back without blinking. Name, rank, serial number. The German straightens, annoyed. At the doorway, he pauses. The Russian front is coming. I wonder who will reach you first, my countrymen or theirs. The door slams. For the first time since the crash, real fear creeps into Rojohn's spine. By nightfall, the prisoners are loaded onto trains. Wooden boxcars with no seats. Freezing air leaks through every crack. They huddle together like animals seeking warmth. The journey east takes days. Time stops having meaning. Food comes once daily. A crust of rye bread. A cup of turnip soup that tastes like muddy water. Thirst claws at them. Frostbite gnaws their fingers. When the train finally stops, they step out into a snow-covered prison camp on the Baltic coast. The sign reads, Stalag Luft 1. Barbed wire surrounds rows of wooden barracks. Guard towers loom overhead, machine guns pointed down like the eyes of hungry predators. Welcome to hell. Inside Barracks 9, they find other surviving members of their crew. The reunion is emotional, but brief. They count heads. Russo isn't coming. His absence forms another empty bunk, another name whispered in the dark. That first night, Rojohn cannot sleep. The crash replays endlessly. The screech of impact, the flames, Russo's prayers, his final look. Leek watches him silently. You did everything a man could do. Rojohn shakes his head. Everything except save him. Leek leans closer, his voice low and firm. If guilt keeps you alive, then carry it. Just don't let it crush you. Rojohn clenches his fists under the thin blanket. His knuckles crack. I won't break. He says it like a vow. A vow forged in smoke and fire. Days in the camp blur together in monotonous suffering. Roll call at dawn in freezing wind. Barely edible soup at noon. Grey bread that tastes like sawdust at evening. Lights out long before sleep can come. The guards shout. The dogs bark. The towers watch. Sometimes they hear distant explosions. Rumors spread like wildfire through the barracks. The Russians are close. Berlin is collapsing. We might be shot if the front gets too near. Each rumor brings either hope or terror. Usually both. Rojohn takes pencil and scraps of paper from a Red Cross parcel. He begins writing letters in his mind to Russo's family. Words that try to give peace where there can be none. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Russo, your son was a brave man. He faced death with faith and courage. He was not alone. He writes that line over and over in his head. It doesn't stop hurting. The prisoners fight to survive, not just physically but mentally. They tell stories, sing songs quietly so guards won't punish them. Some carve small wooden toys. Others trade half a bread slice for a razor to shave and feel human again. One night, a British prisoner named Campbell stands on a bunk and whispers a makeshift speech. They think this camp breaks us. They forget that we already stare death in the eyes from a sky full of fire. We don't break, we bend. Then we rise. Men cheer under their breath. Small victories matter. But Rojohn watches Leek growing thinner and quieter every day. Survival isn't guaranteed. Winter can kill as surely as shrapnel. Though Rojohn rarely prays, he finds himself whispering into the dark. Give us one more chance at morning. February 1945 brings new rumors. The Russians reached the Oder River. Hitler hides in a bunker. Americans cross the Rhine. Germany is collapsing. Even the guards seem unsure of the future. One morning, a young German soldier whispers to Rojohn during roll call, "War ends soon. Stay alive." Rojohn searches his face. "How do you know?" The soldier looks toward the east, where the sky glows faintly red. Because fire is coming. The Red Army advances like an unstoppable storm. Gunfire thunders from beyond the forests. The ground trembles. Guard discipline falters. The air smells of change. One night, alarms blare. Guards rush everywhere. Dogs bark and howl. German officers shout contradictory orders. Evacuate the camp. The prisoners must march. A forced march in freezing conditions would be a death sentence. A prisoner whispers to Rojohn, "If they take us from here, we're dead men." Rojohn nods. We stay, no matter what. Gunshots crack through the darkness. Screams echo. Then sudden, deep silence. Minutes later, tank engines growl from beyond the wire. Soviet T-34 tanks smash through the gates. The night Stalag Luftwaffe began with a sound the prisoners had never heard before inside the wire. Cheering, not from guards, not from pain, cheering from hundreds of men who had forgotten how. A T-34 tank crashes straight through the main gate. Barbed wire snaps. Wooden planks splinter. Soviet infantry follows, shouting in Russian, rifles raised. The prisoners surge forward, unsure if this is rescue or another form of hell. A Soviet soldier raises his weapon until someone cries out in broken German, "Amerikansky! Flyers! Prisoners!" The soldier lowers his gun. His expression softens. "You Americans. Good. You go home soon." Some men fall to their knees and sob. Others laugh, unable to process joy. A few simply stare, unable to believe survival is still possible. Rojohn feels his legs weaken. Leek grabs his arm, keeping him upright. "We made it," Leek whispers. Rojohn swallows hard. "We survived the sky. We survived the cage. Now we survive the world after." The Soviets lead the Americans out of the camp. Snow coats the ground in thick layers. Outside the wire, the scale of destruction becomes clear. Fields burned, villages in ruins, civilians wandering like ghosts. The sky smells of winter and death. The Soviets give them bowls of steaming barley soup. The warmth stings their cracked lips, a reminder of life returning to their bodies. The freed POWs travel slowly west toward American-controlled territory. Trucks fail. Roads collapse. Bridges lie twisted in rivers. Sometimes they walk for miles in silence, boots crunching frost, breath rising like smoke signals to heaven. At night, they sleep in barns or abandoned farmhouses. Rats scurry. The cold gnaws. Rojohn wakes from nightmares drenched in sweat. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees Russo's face, hears the turret creak, smells the fire. One night, sitting near a small fire, Rojohn speaks aloud. "Bill, when Russo was praying, I could hear every word." Leek stares into the flames. "He was praying for all of us." Rojohn shakes his head slowly. He knew he was going to die. Leek's eyes glisten in the firelight. So did we. The difference is, we lived long enough to feel guilty about it. Rojohn looks away, jaw clenched. "Why him? Why not me?" Leek answers with gentle firmness. "Because you had a job left to finish. You still do." "What job?" Leek tips his head toward the sky. "To make sure his sacrifice means something." The words strike deep. Rojohn says nothing more. In early April, they reach an American field hospital near the Elbe River. White tents flutter in the cold breeze. Medics rush forward, shocked by the sight of skeletal airmen still wearing shredded flight gear. Rojohn and Leek are carried inside, wrapped in blankets, fed broth, and bread that tastes like heaven. Doctors check them over. Nurses offer gentle smiles. Warmth returns to their bones. After medical evaluation, they're transported to Camp Lucky Strike, a repatriation center in France. For the first time in months, Rojohn sleeps in a real bed. Sheets. A pillow. It feels almost sinful. A nurse writes his name on a chart. Lieutenant Glenn Rojohn, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Hearing his hometown spoken aloud nearly breaks him. The next morning, a chaplain approaches while he eats. "Lieutenant, the men you saved speak highly of you." Rojohn swallows hard. "I only wish I could have saved them all." The chaplain nods. "Some burdens are too heavy to carry alone. You can share them, you know." Rojohn answers without looking up. "I don't know how." May 1945. The war in Europe officially ends. Flags rise. Music plays. People dance in streets around the world. Peace has arrived. But peace doesn't erase scars. The survivors board the SS Washington, a troop ship bound for America. As the ship pulls away from Europe, Rojohn stands at the railing, wind whipping his hair. He stares back toward the continent. Somewhere under that sky, Russo rests forever. Leek steps beside him. He hands Rojohn a cigarette and lights his own. "Here's to Russo," Leek says softly. Rojohn raises the cigarette to his lips. "To Russo." They smoke in silence, letting the wind carry the ashes of memory. When the European coastline disappears, Rojohn feels something loosen inside his chest. Not freedom, not yet, but the first breath of it. Home waits over the horizon. He wonders what home looks like after a man has fallen from the sky and lived. On the third morning at sea, fog lifts. A silhouette rises from the mist. The Statue of Liberty stands with her torch raised against a pale sky. No one speaks for a long moment. Tough men cry without shame. Some pray. Others keep their heads down, afraid hope is still a trick. Rojohn grips the railing so tight his knuckles turn white. His chest aches. The ache feels honest. Leek bumps his shoulder lightly. "Welcome home, Glenn." Rojohn nods. His voice doesn't trust itself. The ship slides into New York Harbor. Bands play on the pier. Flags whip in the wind. Crowds line the docks, waving hats and handkerchiefs. They file down the gangway onto American soil. A military chaplain greets them with handshakes that linger longer than protocol requires. Coffee so hot it burns. Donuts so sweet they taste unreal. A captain approaches with a folder. Lieutenant Glenn Rojohn, you're requested at a briefing room in 30 minutes. The briefing room smells of paper and ink. A colonel sits behind a desk, reading reports. You're Rojohn, he says, not looking up. Yes, sir. You rode another B-17 to the ground. He scans the report, raises his eyebrows, and places the file down. What you and your co-pilot did isn't in any manual. It shouldn't have worked. Yet you brought men home who were already counted dead. That's the definition of valor. Rojohn looks at the floor. Valor would have saved everyone. The colonel's voice softens. Valor isn't magic. Valor is duty under impossible conditions. He slides a commendation across the desk. Already approved. The Distinguished Flying Cross. For you and Lieutenant Leake. Rojohn rests his hand on the paper. The words look sterile. The memory behind them bleeds. Thank you, sir. Write your letters, the colonel adds quietly. Then live. The first letter takes 3 days to compose. Rojohn starts, tears up the page, starts again, stares out windows, sleeps twice in the middle of sentences. He addresses it to Mr. and Mrs. Russo. He tells them about their son's courage. He tells them Joe stayed at his post when others would have fled. He tells them that Faith lived inside a glass sphere that day and that it rose higher than flames. He doesn't write about the sound when the planes locked together. He doesn't mention how the metal refused to bend. He doesn't describe the smell of burning rubber and leaking fuel. He writes the truth that matters. Your son was not alone. We saw him. We heard him. We prayed with him. We carry him. When he finishes, his hands tremble. He seals the envelope like a man setting a stone upon a grave. Leake appears in the doorway, holding his own letter, eyes red. You wrote it. I did. Leake exhales. Good. Now write the next one. Rojohn nods. I'll write them all. Recovery takes time that clocks cannot measure. The body mends. The mind negotiates. Joy returns in short flashes, then retreats like a tide. Loud noises send Rojohn back to the sky without warning. The smell of gasoline makes his heart race. He wakes, sometimes with fists clenched so tight his fingernails cut his palms. He still flies. He cannot imagine not flying. Later, when the world needs pilots for the new age of peace, he sits at controls of aircraft that carry families instead of bombs. He guides them through storms and into quiet gates, where tired children lean on their mother's shoulders. He never forgets the sky keeps two faces, one face of mercy, one face of judgment. Leake visits often. They sit on porches, trade stories, refuse to romanticize horror. They laugh about small things, the way flak jackets never fit right, the taste of terrible coffee, jokes that made them laugh before dangerous missions. They raise glasses on December 31st each year. To Russo, Leake says. To Russo, Rojohn answers. They say other names too. The roll call of the lost never gets shorter. It just sounds calmer. There's one pilgrimage Rojohn delays for years. He knows the address. He carries it in his wallet. He has written letters and received replies. Handwritten, steady, full of grace. But he hasn't stood on that porch and said the things that need saying. On a humid summer afternoon, he finally drives across town. He parks at the curb of a modest house with a carefully tended garden. He walks up the path with knees that feel heavier than they should. He removes his hat. A woman opens the door. Silver hair. Eyes that could make a stranger feel seen. A man stands behind her. Face lined. Shoulders square. Mrs. Russo? Yes, she says, her voice carrying both welcome and worry. You must be Lieutenant Rojohn. He swallows. Glenn, please. She steps aside. Come in, Glenn. They sit at a small table where a photograph stands in a simple frame. Joe Russo smiles from inside a leather jacket, hands on hips. A boy pretending he wasn't scared. A man trying to look brave. Rojohn tells them the story again. Slower now, with pauses long enough to hold their son. He tells them Joe prayed, and that his prayer was strong. He tells them Joe didn't beg for himself. He prayed for his crew. He prayed for forgiveness, to be real. He prayed like a man who knew that love makes courage possible. Mrs. Russo holds a handkerchief she never raises to her eyes. Mr. Russo stares at the table, nodding at things only he can see. When Rojohn finishes, Mrs. Russo reaches across the table and places her hand on his. Thank you for bringing him back to us. He frowns, not understanding. You brought him back with your words? She continues. You carried him all these years. That's love. That's what his brothers in arms do. That's what we asked God for on nights when we couldn't sleep. Rojohn cannot speak. Something unclenches in his chest. Air finally goes all the way into his lungs. At the door, Mr. Russo stops him. You were his pilot. You still are. Rojohn nods once. Yes, sir. He drives home with the window cracked, letting the wind take what it wants. Decades pass. The war recedes in the world's rearview mirror, but it stays fresh in those who wear it under their skin. At reunions in hotel ballrooms, men rise to speak and cannot complete their sentences. Others speak for them. An historian presents a short film recreating the mid-air collision using models and diagrams. The room watches in silence. When it ends, the applause is soft, respectful. Some men remain seated with heads bowed. Leek leans close, voice a whisper grown familiar through years. You know what I think about when I watch that? What? I think about how we didn't stop being afraid, but we did the work anyway. Rojohn smiles, tired and content. That's the only kind of courage I believe in. The Master of Ceremonies asks them to stand. He tells the audience that 2 pilots who should have died refused to die until their duty was done. He speaks of machine and muscle, of smoke and prayer, of a descent that defied physics because friendship wanted a different ending. Afterward, strangers thank them. Some are pilots. Some are sons and daughters of airmen who never came home. Some are people who needed a story that proves the human heart can fly farther than the body. A young man in a leather jacket shakes Rojohn's hand last. My grandfather flew a B-17. He never talked about it. I think he would have liked you. Rojohn squeezes his hand. I would have liked him too. Time does what time always does. It thins the crowd. It leaves fewer chairs at banquets. It asks those who remain to speak for those who cannot. Rojohn keeps his promise to remember. He speaks at schools. He answers letters. He visits graves on quiet mornings when dew makes grass shine like it holds 1,000 small suns. He speaks Russo's name aloud when no one else is around. He knows names slip from the world when no mouths carry them. He won't let that happen. On one winter evening near the end of his life, he sits with Leek on a porch wrapped in coats. The sky above them is clear, stars crisp and close. Leek breaks the silence. Tell me again what you think the sky was trying to teach us. Rojohn takes his time. That there are moments when a man is asked a question he didn't know existed. The question is simple. Do you hold on or do you let go? We held on. We held on to each other. Leek laughs quietly. Stubborn to the end. Blessedly stubborn, Rojohn says. They sit a while longer, listening to nothing important. A plane crosses the sky far above, a quiet light moving with purpose. They watch until it disappears. Bring them home, Leek says. Amen, Rojohn answers. If you walk near an airfield at dawn, when the world is cold and clean, and everything smells like new beginnings, you might hear an echo that doesn't belong to this century. It sounds like a prayer said by a young man in a glass sphere. It sounds like 2 pilots arguing about who saved whom. It sounds like laughter inside a bomber that still believes it will land. You might mistake it for wind. You would be wrong. It's memory. And it flies. It flies when stories are told truthfully. It flies when courage refuses to accept that some endings are inevitable. It flies when names are spoken. On December 31st, 1944, 10 men climbed into a B-17 called Little Skipper. 6 came home. Those 6 carried 4 with them for the rest of their lives. This is what it means to bring someone home. You carry them in your words. You carry them in your deeds. You carry them into the future so they don't vanish. History records the mission as concluded. The men who lived knew better. The real mission began on the ground. Keep faith, hold tight, land together. If anyone asks how Glenn Rojohn and William Leake survived the impossible, the answer is simple in a way that makes people cry. They refused to let go.